Now, I've told you a few things about myself, where I work. I'm married to Alison. I have 2 adult daughters, 1 son-in-law and 1 9-month-old granddaughter. I love football. In my later years, I've played golf and enjoyed that. I love walking in the mountains. I love movies. I love reading books. I play the guitar. I enjoy playing jazz and blues. I cut my musical teeth on Led Zeppelin, Jethro Tull. That tells you something about my age. But I love the old African-American blues musicians, Muddy Waters, Memphis Slim. And I hate sitting in traffic. I absolutely hate sitting in traffic. I've been driving for a long time. I'm 66. I've been driving since the age of 12. You might say, how is that possible? Remember farm, right? And on the farm, you just get behind a thing with a steering wheel and wheels and you drive. Because you're on the farm, you're not on the public roads. All my life, I have hated sitting in traffic. So you can imagine what fun I have in Nairobi, right? But I'm a passenger in Nairobi, so that's fine. Brother Fred is the one of the problems. He's driving. Now, because I hate sitting in traffic, and is this true for me only, or is this you guys as well? The biggest, if you're married, hands up those of you who are married? Okay, quite a few. Is it fair to say that the biggest domestic disputes in your life happen in the car with you and your wife? Is that a fair comment? Driving with your wife, that's a recipe for disagreement. Well, maybe not so much. Too many secrets being let out here. I hate sitting in traffic. I really do. And so, even though the Google map tells me, go this way, if there's traffic, what am I going to do? Especially in my own town, I'm going to take a shortcut. My wife will tell you that my shortcuts almost never end well. Okay? Darling, I'm taking a shortcut. I can see Alison going, I've seen this movie before. And there I go, taking this turn, and then there, and then there, and then I find that road's closed, then I have to come back, and then I take this shortcut, and then I have to come back, and then I find myself joining the traffic, but now I'm 40 cars back from where I was when I took my shortcut. Is this just me? Maybe. Now, taking shortcuts when you're driving, well, it inconveniences you, mainly with time and sometimes with petrol. Taking shortcuts when you prepare your sermons, that is a far more serious thing. Agreed? Taking shortcuts in our sermon preparation, well, that's a whole nother matter and a far more serious matter. Where I come from in South Africa, the sad reality is that much of the preaching that I hear, whether it's on the television or whatever it is, it's obvious to me that the preacher has taken a shortcut. The shortcut, I suppose, can be shown. I'm going to put this as a dotted line because it's not really a line that we want to follow. The shortcut is really, here's my text, and immediately I think I've got my sermon for today. I'll read my text once. Yep, okay, I know what I want to say to my people today. Now, just let me hear from you guys. Why do you think this kind of thing happens? Why do people take shortcuts in their preparation? What are some of the reasons that might cause people? Never you, of course. I mean, you don't do this. I know you don't. But we're talking about other people. Those people out there, right? Big voice? Time. Yeah. Time. We don't have time, so off we go. Laziness. Okay. Yeah. Have you ever thought about this, that the best place for lazy people to hide is in the ministry? You say, come on, man. Yeah. You can look so busy. You know, laziness is actually being busy with everything except the one thing you should be busy with, right? Yeah. So we can be so busy. So busyness, right? Which I've put here right next to laziness. Because often being busy is just an excuse for not doing the thing we should be doing. Somebody else had a hand. Yeah. Pride. I got this. Hey, Romans 1 to 18. I got this. Ephesians, whatever. No, I got this. I don't need to do the work. By the way, please don't ever microwave your sermons. Do you know what I mean by that? You preach on Ephesians 1. I got my sermon on Ephesians 1. In the filing cabinet it comes. Somebody invites you to preach on Ephesians 1. Out of the filing cabinet it comes. Into the microwave it goes. Onto the pulpit it goes. Others? Yep.
They don't know any better.
Yeah. Yeah. We just don't know. We just don't know any better. This is the way it's done, right? And often that is related to the models we have. We don't have good models of preparation. And the people that we may look up to and admire, they seem to do it just like that, intuitively. So we think, well, that's the way to do it. Okay, so that's why. What is the result of this kind of shortcut preparation? What does it produce? What does it lead to? Do you think? Any ideas? Does it lead to sermons that are not entertaining? No. I've heard some shortcut sermons that are brilliantly entertaining, especially if people are gifted communicators, right? In fact, we're going to give you a little task in just a moment to get your best entertainer out. And I don't have any money to give you a prize. Normally I carry money in my pocket, but in the days of plastic I don't. Otherwise I'd give you a prize for the best one. But then I'd alienate the room because it would be, why didn't you give me the prize? So we just won't do that. But in a moment you'll get a chance to get your best entertaining TED Talk preaching version out. But what's the real problem with this? Chris, you had your hand?
Yeah, I think you end up with the premise you ended with, which is what I want to tell my people.
Yeah.
So that tends to shape.
Yep.
The source of dance is very subjective.
Subjective. Yeah. We can understand the pressure because we want to be relevant, right? We want our preaching to speak to people. We can understand that. We want to get to today. We really want to get to today. We'll see in a moment that preaching that's just there with them then, the first audience, very, very often becomes a boring lecture. We want to get to today. But in my opinion, and I think it's come out in these two comments, if I can do another little drawing here, in my opinion, the biggest problem is that there's a shift in authority. Right? This kind of shortcut in preparation means that inevitably the preacher becomes the authority. The preacher is king over the text. Yep. And that, dear brothers, is something we really don't want. This drawing's got to be different, right? Because really in expositional preaching, we want the text to be king over the preacher. We want the Bible in the driving seat, rather than my ideology or my opinions or my framework or my theological, whatever it is, my church tradition. We don't want that in the driving seat. We want the text in the driving seat. And the problem with going from the text straight to today is that we end up preaching our theological or ideological framework. Sorry. Or even our cultural framework. That's what happens. We might call this over-contextualization, but really it's about the preacher driving the sermon. Okay, let me give us let's try and work on this. Turn with me to Jeremiah 29, verse 7. Jeremiah 29, verse 7. Somebody just read that one verse for us, please.
Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord's voice, because if it prospers, you too will prosper.
Thank you. Now, what I'd like you to do with the guys around you is I'd like you to think about a shortcut sermon, a framework sermon on that verse. Someone's given you Jeremiah 29:7 as a text. And you're speaking at a conference of Christians and pastors. And Jeremiah 29:7 is your text. And you've been busy all week. You've had 4 weddings and a funeral, or whatever it is. You've been running around. You've been doing all sorts of administration. You've had to meet the building contractors because the roof is leaking. Da-da-da-da-da. You've got to give the talk on Saturday. It's Friday lunchtime. Jeremiah 29:7. Okay, what am I going to say? You understand? Now, I know that you don't ever do this, right? I know you don't do this. But just for our sake here in the room today, do you think you can do this? So with the guys around you, you come up with a first impression framework. Ideally, we'd like your title for what your sermon's going to be. If your sermon title encapsulates the thing that you want people to do from this text, take it a few moments, work with your neighbor, cook something up. We'll have a vote as to which we think is the best one. If you give me something orthodox and good, we're going to reject it straight away, okay? By the way, can I just tell you that in my choice of this text, I have no agenda. All right. Let's hear them. Jeremiah 29:7 is your text. Let's have some titles.
Yeah, for the Nairobians, they will know Nairobi lazima iwaka.
For the non-Nairobians?
Yeah, our governor says that. The governor of Nairobi.
Says what? To translate it for me?
It must work.
It must work.
My city must work.
My city must work. So what's your role in his city working, brother? I'm with the governor. Seek the welfare of the city. Yeah, Benny Hinn maybe should have come to this workshop, right? Seek prosperity. Pray for prosperity. And you will find prosperity. Brother, can I ask you to do me a favor? Could you stand up for a moment? Okay. Could you just walk out into the aisle? I just want to see if you're wearing prosperity shoes. But you're not. You're wearing evangelical shoes. It's fine. You know those prosperity shoes, right? Those long ones, shiny ones.
I was working with a group of professionals
Yes.
who have experience, and we came up with this city takeover.
City takeover. Ken for mayor.
Keys to tripling your welfare
Keys to tripling your welfare
and dominate your city.
and dominate. Wow. Ish. You don't have any Zulu blood in you, eh? That sounds like Ishaka.
We came up with warfare, the power for welfare.
Warfare, the power for welfare. Wow. Spiritual warfare, the power for welfare, because it's pray for prosperity, right? You guys in the back had your hands up early in the game. What have you got? God helps those who help themselves. And if you're an accountant, you say, God help those who help themselves, right? Any others?
We came up with
Build my city.
which means, yes, the city you're in, but also the church.
Okay?
So I'm telling you to build my church
Yes.
by praying and seeking prosperity for my church.
Right. Are you a Baptist by any chance? Yes, sir.
And in doing so, you will then prosper.
Ah,
Build
okay.
my city, build my church,
City is church. Yeah.
seek my prosperity, and you will prosper and prosper.
Yeah. Right. That's a 20-point sermon, but yes, thank you.
The prosperity of the city is in your hand.
Hey. There's a burden for all of you. The prosperity of your city is in your hands. Well done, guys. You realize you can make a living doing this, right? Okay. Now, I think we know instinctively that something isn't right here. Yeah? But why not? And what is a better way? What I'd like you to do now, again in your group, is I'd like you just very quickly to look at Jeremiah 29, 1 to 14. So 29:7 was our text. And I want you to look at Jeremiah 29, 1 to 14. And I want you to ask the question, how does reading that text in the context of Jeremiah 29, 1 to 14, how does that shape or change what Jeremiah 29, 7 is actually saying? So now we are pursuing what that verse actually meant. Okay? You with me? To work. I'll give you 5 minutes for this. All right, gentlemen, how are you doing? You ready to give some feedback, or do you need a minute or two more? More time? More time, okay? Okay. Let's hear what you found and discovered just by looking at 29:1 to 14. How might you rethink what you've said from 29:7 earlier on in the light of 29:1 to 14? Any takers? Perhaps let me ask a question to help. Who is this 29:7? Who is it directed to? It comes in what? In a letter. And a letter to whom? Yeah, the surviving elders of the exiles, the priests, etc., who have been taken into exile. And the letter was sent, and it begins verse 4. Someone read verse 4 for us. 29:4.
Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon.
Yeah, so the first thing we learn is that before ever we think about this text in relation to today, we actually have to think about this text in relation to the first audience. Okay? Now, what is it that this text is saying to the exiles? What is its purpose in the light of what you've read? Yep. The journey is long. Yeah. So the journey is long. Does everybody agree with that? I mean, it's framed in an idiomatic, a nice idiomatic sense. How does verse 8 help us? Because it's, seek the welfare of the city where I've sent you into exile. Pray to the Lord on its behalf. For its welfare you will find welfare. Verse 8. For thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, do not let your prophets and your diviners who are among you deceive you, and do not listen to the dreams that they dream. For it is they that are prophesying in my name. I did not send them. So there's the wrong authority, right? These people are preaching by their own authority, not God's. But seek the welfare of the city comes against the very next verse, don't listen to the prophets. Now, what the prophets are actually saying is not in 29:1 to 14. Did anybody find what the prophets were saying in 29:1 to 14? No? But where did you find it? In 28. And where in chapter 28? Yeah, so 1 to 4, and in particular verse 2. Right, somebody read 28, 1 to 4 for us. So there it is. The message of the prophets in Babylon are 2 years and you're going home. 2 years and it's all over. 2 years the Babylonians will be overthrown. 2 years you're on the plane and you're going back home. Don't worry, it's over soon. 29:7 comes as part of marry, dig in, pray for the welfare of the city, build houses. In other words, you are going to be here for a long time. But what did 29, 1 to 14 also tell us? You are going to be here for a long time, but you will return when? Well, 70 years in time. Does it actually give us the 70? Where does it tell us 70 years? Verse 10, thank you. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will visit you. I will fulfill my promise. I will bring you back. So the false prophets are right in saying, the other prophets are right in saying, you will come back. What they're wrong about is the time. But what will also be the key to them coming back? Verse 12. When you call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. And you will seek me when you seek me with all your heart. So what are we supposed to be seeking now? Are we meant to be seeking the welfare of the city, or are we meant to be seeking the Lord with all our heart? And the answer is both. If we are Israel's in exile. Right? Now, we're not done yet. What was the tool that we used to shift our wrong understanding of Jeremiah 29:7 to a better understanding of Jeremiah 29:7? You will have used this tool in preparation of your worksheet for today. What tool is it? Context. And which context? Literary context, right? We've just looked at the verse in the context of the surrounding verses and the chapter before. So we've used the context tool, and the context tool is part of what process? Exegesis. Right? So our pathway for preparation then, because that's all we're busy doing, we're busy building a Google map, a reliable map for how to prepare our sermons. I know it's taking long on this journey. It feels like 70 years, I know that. But don't worry, it'll only be 2 years and then we'll be done. We are going from the text to the first audience and to what on your question sheet is number 3, the author's argument, the point that the author is arguing. And we are following the pathway of exegesis. So we know no shortcuts. We know we've got to do exegetical work. Now, there's other exegetical work. In fact, we're going to do structure in the next instruction. So context is not the only one, but context certainly has helped us. Question, once we've got there now, having done this context work and seen that this is a word to the exiles, that the exile will be longer than the false prophets are prophesying, and that you need to dig in and settle in, and in that process really seek the welfare of Babylon. What an extraordinary thing, by the way. Seek the welfare of Babylon, because its welfare will be your welfare. Because you're going to be there for a long time, right? Your kids are going to grow up there. Your grandchildren are going to be born there. So you want it to be a good place for them to live in, right? You do want that. It's going to be long. Are we ready to preach now? Do you think? Can we go straight from the first audience down to today? The answer is no. And if we did, what would we end up doing? What would our sermons be like? Moralistic, right? And sometimes legalistic. So they prayed, you must pray. They took wives, you must take a wife. No, that doesn't quite work. You understand what I mean, though? So we go straight from them then, straight down to today. We end up with moralistic and legalistic sermons. So that's a no-go street. So what do we need to do next? And this particularly for those of you who've been here. Yeah. Thank you. We need now, because we are what sort of preachers? We are Christians who are preaching the whole Bible as Christian scripture. We're going to do an instruction on connecting to the gospel. But that's our next step on our pathway, right? On a dotted line. And this pathway here is theological reflection. All our theological work, our biblical theology, our systematic theology, our historical theology, all of that fits along that top line. But the primary thing we're doing is looking for, how does my passage, Jeremiah 29, how does that connect to the gospel? Yep. Because we're not ready to preach when we've only know what Jeremiah said to the exiles. We want to know what the Word of God is saying to my people today. And we want to do that in the light of the gospel. Now, there's a whole instruction on connecting to the gospel, but because we've got just a bit of time, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about one way in which you might connect this passage with what it's saying about the exiles and the length of time and a return from exile, a promised return from exile. How might you connect that to the gospel? With me? Just think of one way in which you might do that. Talk with your colleagues and try and think of one strategy that you might use, one thing that you might see in your text that can help you think and connect to the gospel. Everybody understand what you need to do? We haven't done the instruction yet, I understand that. For those of you new, you might think, oh, okay, I don't know what to do here. But have a go anyway. All right, sorry to interrupt you. I'm deliberately cutting it short because I don't want you to have a whole big gospel connection conversation. There'll be time enough for that. So let's hear, gentlemen. What is one thing that you observe in Jeremiah 29:7 which you might use to connect to the gospel? And what strategy would you use to do that? I mean, what is that thing, that gospel connection? Give me an idea. Some of you, just anybody's thoughts? Don't be afraid to, remember there are no stupid answers. We're just having a go. Yep. 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 So God is going to come and God is going to do something. God is going to visit his people in exile and he is going to do something, and the consequence of what God will do will be what? An end to their exile. Right? And restoration to the promised land. Yep. So that's helpful, right? So now we're starting to think, all right, how does God coming to visit his people in exile and restoring them to the land, how does that apply to us? What needs to be true for us if God's visit to his people in Babylon to restore them, what needs to be true for us if we can apply that validly to ourselves? What must be true of our present condition? We're in exile, right? And where would we find that in the New Testament? 1 Peter, written to Jewish Christians, where they are described as exiles and strangers in the world, right? Now, here's my question. Has God visited his people and ended their exile? Yes or no? Yes and no. Right? Where's the yes? Well, before Christ, where was the yes? Yeah, Zerubbabel, the return to the land. What we are dealing with here is a strategy called biblical theological themes, right? We are looking at the theme of exile and return. The theme of exile actually starts in Eden, doesn't it? Humanity exiled from the garden. It will find its fulfillment in a return to the new creation. But in the story of the people of Israel, they are exiled from the land, and there's going to be a lot about that in Amos, right? The warning of that exile. But there will also be the promise of a return. But we know, and Ezra, Nehemiah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi all tell us that the return to the land was not the ultimate end of the exile, right? Look with me at Matthew chapter 1, verses 17. Matthew 1:17. We can almost quote it by memory, right? I should be able to quote it by memory because I did my PhD work on Matthew. So here we go. All the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations. All the generations from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations. And from the deportation to Babylon to the Christ, 14 generations. Interesting, what is left out of that historical trajectory? We've got Abraham to David, we've got David to the exile. We've got no 14 generations or any form of generations from the exile to the return to the land, right? It's just left out. We go from the exile to the Christ, Jesus, the son of Abraham, the son of David. Matthew's point, in Jesus, Israel's exile is ended. Jesus ends the exile. And he ends the exile not just for Israel, because he's not only son of David, in verse 1 of Matthew, he's also son of Abraham. He ends the exile for all the peoples of the world who have been exiled from the presence of God. But has it happened fully? Not yet. And so we wait. And so what should we do as we wait? We should seek the welfare of the city where we are. We should pray for its prosperity. We should get on with life. Thessalonians, remember, a warning to those who think the return of Christ means that normal, ordinary life should be put on hold. No, work hard, serve the city. So interestingly, we've arrived at a similar place, but for a very different reason. Right? For a very different reason. Once we've got our gospel connection, are we ready to preach? Not yet. What's missing? Let me put our little diagram up, our pathway up. Sorry about my scrawly handwriting. Problem is, if we preach at this point, we end up giving theological and exegetical lectures in the pulpit. Our preaching just becomes a lecture about the Bible or about biblical theology. 10,000 are their texts and all their sermons. Jesus is the answer to your problems. So what do we have to work on? We still have to work hard at this last line, which we might call persuasion. And we'll have a look and see what characterizes this process, what parts are here. We're not ready to preach yet when we've worked out the exegetical truth of our passage, what it meant to the first audience, what the author's argument is, the main point that the author is arguing. We know what that is for Jeremiah, right? You're going to be there a long time. Don't listen to the false prophets. Dig in and seek the blessing. We've done the gospel connection through exile restoration. We've connected those things, right? We've done all of that. But we still need to sit down now and we need to think. We've got all these ingredients. How are we going to put the food on the plate? Imagine I invite you to come and look at my house in Cape Town. I wish I could have you over for dinner. And you arrive there, and what you see is a plot of land, and roof trusses, and piles of stones, and piles of sand, and bags of cement, and piles of bricks, and wonderful door frames, and window frames, and everything. You're going to think that maybe I'm not so healthy, right? You'll say to me, brother, I'll tell you what, build the house, and then I'll love to come and have a look at it. So much preaching is roof trusses, bags of cement, bags of stone, bags of sand, bricks, window frames, exegetical lecture. We've still got to make the journey from the author's argument, as you know from your prep sheet, to what am I going to argue to my audience in the light of the gospel. And with Old Testament texts like Amos, in the light of the gospel becomes very, very important. Otherwise, what are we doing? We're just preaching moralistic sermons. Do this, don't do that, obey God. Chase justice, be more just, whatever. No gospel connections. But we still need to finish the pathway. Just quickly as we end, what are some of the ways that we can help one another to not take shortcuts, but stay on the pathway? What are some of the things we can do to ensure that we stay on the path? Yeah, we saw that one of the enemies to staying on the path, or one of the reasons for shortcuts, is a time problem. The remedy is take time. Sermon prep should start on Monday morning, not Friday evening. That's my policy. It may not work precisely for you, but honestly, if by Wednesday, Thursday, we're not working on the text, I think we've got problems, right? Now, brothers, I understand. How many of you are bivocational couple? I thank you for your work, and thank you for the labor that you put in to serve God's people by working hard at a job and working hard at the Bible. And it's particularly difficult for bivocational pastors. But we have to allow time if we're going to follow this path, right? This takes time. And we haven't done when we've worked out the theology and the biblical theology and the exegesis. We need to take time to think about what are we going to say, what's the main point we want to argue to our audience. And we need to think about a whole lot of things, like how we're going to arrange our sermonic outline. How are we going to apply this? How are we going to adorn the sermon by picking the right words to bring home the tone and the message of the text? All of that's in the persuasion line. And we need to allow time to think about that. Dave Helm, who's my colleague in the Simeon Trust, using a Narnia illustration, talks about spending time in the wood between the worlds, where we've done all the exegesis and we've done the biblical theological work early on in the piece. And then we just let it sit. And we think about our people, and we think about our society, and we think about our world, and we think about the people who are going to be in the room on Sunday, and we think, how am I going to argue this big thing that I've now understood for my people at this time? This is why we can't microwave our sermons, dear brothers, because every time we come to Jeremiah 29, the exegesis won't change. Well, we might improve it. The gospel connections might get better, but the audience will have changed. The world will have changed. Our circumstances will have changed. And the sermon, therefore, cannot be the same, right? Because the world has moved on. And we need to work hard. I throw my sermons away on a Monday morning. I throw them in the bin. And I start again. If I come to the same text, I start again from scratch.